We back. Wow. I am going to talk to the authors of The Myth of Good Christian Parenting. And I know for a fact that good Christian parenting is a myth. I've just been doing some bad Christian parenting downstairs. Whew. Is there any good parenting? I don't know. Is parenting ever good? Answer these questions and more. I'm going to bring in our authors. Oh, there's Kelsey already requesting. Marissa. This is always the awkward part where I'm like, where is everybody?
Hello.
Hello. Sorry, I'm still trying to find Marissa on here.
No worries.
This is always, I feel like Instagram just needs to make a better, there we go. Hey, hello,
Hello.
friends.
The rigging success.
Look at that. We're all here.
We're here.
Got my
Great.
kids.
With
Whew,
you.
I'm a little scrambled. I was just saying as I opened the live that I know for a fact that good Christian parenting is a myth because I've only ever done bad Christian parenting myself. Just finished doing some of it downstairs. The kids are kind of in bed, kind of probably just gonna watch shows until I'm done with the live, and that's fine too.
Fair.
I
Yeah.
did very bad Christian parenting. I took my kids trick-or-treating, and two of them were witches and one was a skeleton. So I think I have failed at Christian parenting today. Right?
Just because it's not Halloween yet, or because you're not supposed to do Halloween? Like because you missed the day completely, it's the wrong day.
No, I grew up in a no witches, no ghosts, no skeletons household. Like we were sort of like my parents were like, okay, fine, we can trick or treat, but like it can't be anything witchy.
Same. I did not grow up trick-or-treating. Is that why you're doing it not on Halloween? Is that like an intentional choice, or it's just the
No, we will go
scheduling?
trick or treating again. We will do it again.
Okay.
This was
Oh,
like
you're
one
double
of the
dipping. You just
yeah,
love
this
that.
was one of the like a church in the neighborhood had a thing. So we went and trick or treated and we'll do different costumes and do it again. So
Kelsey, I have to also say I'm a big fan of your music writing.
thank you.
Um, and when you were just talking about Halloween, it reminded me, I'm sure you have a take. What is it with all the CCM artists getting all worked up about Halloween this year? Why is Forrest Frank trying to get us to not trick or treat? What's going on?
Right? I keep on saying to myself, we did this already. Can I please help you? Like we've already
These
done this.
these babies weren't here for the 90s, and it shows.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, you guys missed it last time around. I'm sorry. Like, I really do think it's like a generational thing, though. Like, I think there's like every generational turnover, there has to be like a rediscovery of like fundamentalist views of Halloween, and that's literally what
It
we're
feels
watching.
like so much is being recycled right now
Yeah.
that I
100%.
thought we already worked through this, and it's like, oh wait, well, will we just never work through anything? We're just gonna have to
No.
eat the same shit sandwich every 20
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Just keep
It
serving
is,
it up.
and it's like complete with the like live with a former Wiccan who will tell you all the things that go on. Like, I mean, like really leaning into that, which I remember that so vividly, like this former witch giving a testimony about,
Mm.
like,
Oh, for sure.
and it's like
Right.
happening again. Just like, oh, of course. But now we need the TikTok version. Like we had that version. Now we need TikTok version.
Well,
And
the reach is even greater in some ways, so that's
Mhm.
like scarier maybe.
yeah.
But enough about that. I would love to talk to you guys about this wonderful and important book. Um, so I was reflecting today on how there's like a never-ending, I guess, industry of books like that are helping us heal from all the different areas. Like, are there
Mm.
any areas where evangelicalism didn't mess us up? Like, I feel like, you've got Sheila Gregors is like, hey, here's how evangelicalism messed us up about sex. Beth Allison Barr, here's how it messed up male-female relationships. I almost wonder if like, yeah, it just seems like an unending supply of just items. I guess maybe my first question is, is there anything good to get out of this project? What's good about evangelical Christian parenting? Did anything surprise you as you went back into it? Were you
Mm.
like, maybe that's a weird way to start.
Marissa, I'll
Yeah,
let you
that's
go first.
interesting. Thanks.
That's not what I came here to talk about at all.
I mean, we
Before we
usually
dive into it.
offer the disclaimer that, like, critiquing these resources is not to say that there's nothing of merit in any of them, right? Like, that's a different kind of fundamentalism to be like, oh, this is all bad and everyone here's a villain. And now we have the right, pure, correct way to parent, something like that can be just a rebranding of some of the same myths that show up. That being said, most of the resources, we'd be hard pressed to say, oh, yeah, this was a net positive, really. And certainly most of the popular Christian parenting ones, there's far more problems than benefits. And if someone experienced it unscathed, that probably is more to do with the credit given their parents for mitigating it or for
Yeah,
their community in balancing it than for the resources themselves.
Yeah.
I think is
that's
fair to
really
say.
well stated.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think even like the frustrating thing to me is like someone can pull a quote from here and be like, but isn't this true? Isn't this good? Like this one quote from Shepherding a Child's Heart or something. And maybe, but also the overall posture that most of these books encourage parents to have toward their children is just absolutely a net negative. Like your parental authority is the first principle. The first calling of children is obedience without question. And that just is a through line through these resources, even though there might be like an anecdote here or there that is kind of like,
Right.
oh, but you should have compassion, or there might be like these kind of asides, but like the overall thrust of it all is
Mm.
just towards this adversarial relationship with
Yeah.
parents and children. And it runs through even books where you wouldn't necessarily expect it, like Chuck Swindoll, who until this project, I thought of him as a pretty like harmless California megachurch pastor. But his parenting book is really extreme in a lot of ways.
Mm.
Yeah.
Man. So
Mm-hmm.
I lived this as well,
Mm.
and I reflected on this some in my own book. I have a chapter
Mm-hmm.
where I talk a bit about parenting, and when you said obedience, it reminds me of an anecdote I share. So I grew up with Patch the Pirate. Any familiarity with Patch the Pirate? You
Mm-hmm.
guys know
Mm-hmm.
what that is?
So
So
he's like
Bob
a
Jones University is its own ecosystem. There's all these different pockets of fundamentalism. So even though I was independent fundamental Baptist, we didn't do much with the Dobson or the not Dobson, sorry, the Gothard people.
mm-hmm.
That's a separate IFB. The Bob Jones crew, we had our own stuff, and Patch the Pirate was like kids' capes. And anyway, he had a song called the Obedience Song. Now, obedience
Mm.
is the very best way to show that you believe. Anyway, like as I would be asked to do chores, my parents would sing the Obedience Song.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, a few years ago, just a couple years ago, I was reflecting, and I share this in my book, that my son was having like an upset in the back seat, and my dad was visiting, so he was with me in town, and I was
Mm.
kind of telling him to buckle, and he wasn't buckling, and we were already on the road, so it was like, oh no, should I pull over? And I just really wanted him to buckle, but he was upset about his toy, and so I'm starting to get agitated, and I'm starting to maybe even threaten or use some
Mm-hmm.
language that is like asserting my authority, and my dad starts singing the obedience song there in the passenger seat. And all
Wow.
of a sudden, I was like triggered and
Yeah.
snapped to like 6-year-old Brian having an upset. Could really use some care, connection, somebody to lean in and meet me on my level. And instead, I'm getting this like
Mm.
obedience thing sung over me. And so that was like what I needed to like pull over and like meet him in his need,
Mm.
and coach him through it. And my dad, after that, basically scolded me and was like, he
Mm.
won, was kind of his remark. Oh, you let him win. This was a power dynamic, and it's a struggle, and either he wins or you win. Either he's in charge or you're in charge. And I was just like, I don't see our relationship that way.
Mm.
And it's actually still in me to see, though I was raised that way, but like I'm trying to break that, and it's really hard. So all that to
Yeah.
say, I resonate deeply with what you're trying to do here. And I would love for you to share what brought you to this project, why you think something like this matters so much.
Yeah. I mean,
Or
what
you
you've
can
just
reflect on what I just shared.
yeah. I mean, what you've shared really spotlights why it matters, right? Because this plays out in families day in, day out in to extended families in generations. It was formative for so many people. And so we both kind of came at this project from different angles and connected on Twitter, of all places, a bright spot on Twitter. But at the time I was thinking about this idea, I'd been thinking about the way problematic theologies and doctrines really enable abuse in Christian communities. Church 2 in every denomination kind of spotlights this. And I was also working on a novel set in the Dominionist movement, Fundamentalist Corners of Christianity, and just like saying, what about what's being taught to people? Like, how does this play into the practical application that enables abuse? And so one day someone on Twitter said, well, if you could write any book, what would you write? And I tweeted out an idea for this book because it had been rumbling around. And the response was pretty swift, of people saying, like, I would read that. Please write that. I wish we had something like that. I wish I had that when I first started out parenting. And I'd heard enough. I'm married to a pastor, and being in Christian communities, I'd heard enough of people's stories too to know that this was a more common than I think we were all as a community willing to talk about. That there was estrangement and inauthentic connection in extended families. That people as adults were talking about what injured them in their childhood, or were deconstructing ideas and were receiving defensiveness and fragility, the same kind of patterns you see in the church family system when a survivor of abuse comes forward. There's an incapacity to listen there, and the desires that everyone would just comply, whether it's for the testimony of the church or to stop whining or to obey. You know, these kind of power dynamics you're talking about in families play out in church families too. So all of that was swirling around, and I tweeted about it, and then I got a DM from Kelsey in my inbox.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, good things happen on Twitter. Yeah, when I saw her message, Marissa did not know anything about her, but I was writing for Christianity Today at the time, and had started thinking about this when my oldest, who's now 8, was about 1. And I started getting resources given to me, or started looking for things for parenting toddlers. I just had not read parenting books prior to having kids. Having kids was not something I thought about very much before having kids, and found myself going and looking. And like you, Brian, I sort of realized I had internalized a lot of ideas about what children are supposed to be and do, and I had internalized more of my childhood than I realized. When I had a child in front of me saying no or having a hard time. And what I found in the Christian resources, I found incredibly troubling, and very unhelpful. And then went looking elsewhere and found something completely different. I found language about developmentally appropriate behavior and different strategies for de-escalating things. And, talking about emotional regulation. I had never in my life thought about any of those things, and realized that there was nothing in the gap between this obedience first world over here, the only thing that matters is parental authority and obedience, and conditioning, basically behaviorism over here with Christianity, and a more temperate approach to helping children learn to be in the world. And so I started kind of taking notes. My husband's also an academic. We both are kind of researchers. And so just for our own purposes, we started doing some research, keeping notes, and then just kind of kept them, because neither of us are educators or child psychologists. I didn't think we'd ever do anything with them. And when I saw Marissa's message, I just reached out and said, hey, I've got this weird collection of notes and stuff that I put together over years. Let me know if you think it'd be helpful. I'd be happy to be a conversation partner. And so we started talking about it. And I had some reservations about being a person to jump into this conversation. My training is not in this area, but I am a researcher. I have a PhD in music history, so I'm a humanist and a cultural historian. But by that time, I was interested in thinking about how this media world, because the Christian parenting research market is a media world. How is that forming Christian parents? And so that makes up a lot of our research and what it ended up being. And that's kind of how the book took shape.
So as we think, we started the conversation talking about how some of these bad ideas circle back over and over again. And one of those bad ideas when it comes to parenting that seems to just not go away is corporal punishment. Just a couple weeks ago, you're very online. I'm sure you saw Maddie Prue and His name escapes me, the billionaire
Grant
son,
Trout. Yeah.
Grant Trout. They went viral talking about how excited they were to be able to spank their daughter when she was old enough. Um, and yeah, there's a mountain of data that says that spanking is bad for kids. It's
Yeah.
harmful. It doesn't do anything good for them. It only does bad things for them developmentally. Why do you think some of these ideas that Christians hold on to so stubbornly are just against even data that's been around for a long time? Like, it's not like this is even new data. We've known now, this is going on several decades, that the data is pretty irrefutable about what it does. Why won't Christians change their mind about things like this?
Yeah. I have so many theories. I mean, when we started writing this book, we knew we'd need to talk about spanking. We have a chapter on corporal punishment that we hope will really speak to this in a number of ways. But I don't think I had any idea how much I would be talking about spanking and writing about spanking, because it's so entrenched. It's so entrenched. It's a hill that a lot of people want to die on, pastors and parents alike. And I've a lot of theories around it. I think a couple of the big ones are, one, the erroneous belief that it's quote unquote biblical, that it is something God requires them to do. A lot of parents are directly told that in these resources. It's simply not so, in case anyone listening needs to hear it. It's not. Nowhere does the Bible require parents to hit their small children. Like, that is not substantiable, but parents are told that. And then they're told things that effectively amount to spank on faith, to sort of say, look, God's ways are higher. This is God's way of parenting. And so anything you're hearing about the harm, it's coming from secular sources of authority, from social scientists who already are viewed with skepticism by a lot of evangelicals. So they will say, don't listen to it. Trust God's ways are higher. So they've been misled, first off, to believe it's God's way. And they've also been taught to mistrust the evidence that would show them it's harmful and ineffective. And a lot of that is due to the influence of the nouthetic biblical counseling movement that happened around the same time the Christian parenting empire media industry was gaining so much prominence. And a lot of these resources are written by people from this particular interpretive framework that approaches the Bible as an instruction manual of life that is going to teach them everything they need to know about parenting. And so it's a problematic hermeneutical or biblical interpretation approach, but that really bolsters it and leaves people not questioning it. Secondly, I think there's like a sunk cost fallacy. Like, once you start out hitting your child, and often these resources recommend it in infancy, in the first year of life, to stop doing that means admitting you maybe didn't have to do that. And I think that can be a really difficult thing for parents to come to terms with.
I can speak to that very directly. I stopped spanking my kids when my oldest was probably 4 or 5, and my twins were then around 2. Was when I kind of was like, what are we doing here? Because I was from the evangelical world. I was a pastor. All the other pastors were spanking. The people that were older than us were spanking. This was the culture. This was what I thought what good parenting was. And when I had small children, I was confronted with data that said this was bad for kids, and it didn't never felt right. It also was never effective. Like, I was seeing the bad fruit of it in my home. It made things worse, not better. So for all those reasons, I changed my mind. And when I did, there was like a coming to Jesus. I had to apologize. My oldest was old enough to, to have a conversation about it. And he brings it up. He's 11 now, or 10 now. And he recently brought it up to me, like, Dad, remember when you used to spank me? Like, like he could hold it over my head every once in a while, and I just get to apologize again. I learned something new and I changed. And that can be hard, but
well, that can be hard, and really, people in evangelical communities are unpracticed at that, right? Yeah. Like, the idea of making a mistake is terrifying, right? Everybody's on this pressure cooker of getting it right. So to admit error, to learn a new way of doing things, all of that requires rejecting the kind of certainty mindset that kind of has a death grip of like, this is the right way to do it. And also, I think there's just a very real lack of other tools. A lot of these resources it's not just what they're saying you should do, it's what they're missing. So a lot of parents are like, well, what else am I supposed to do? Like, how do I parent if I don't have this in my back pocket? And they've been given very little else.
Yeah.
Kelsey, did you have anything that you wanted to chime in on about the spanking thing?
Yeah, I mean, I echo all of what Marissa said, and she's done a lot more of the real like research and kind of theological framing of the chapter that we have in the book about this. You know, it's interesting to me that James Dobson, Dare to Discipline, that, you know, that first book of his, when he makes the case for spanking, it's not a biblical case. It is a like a purely behaviorist case. Right? It's like this is what works. This you must do this. It's the only way a kid 15 months can learn what no means, right? Like there's no other way. And when you read that book, it becomes really clear this is a behaviorist project, and this is it just completely sidesteps any ethical questions of whether or not we should be harming other human beings to teach them something. And I think that that kind of question is
Wow.
really uncomfortable for a lot of evangelicals because it feels like allowing something to supersede the Bible in terms of authority. And so appealing to something like a question of, okay, uh, do you think it's okay to hit an elderly relative who isn't completely in their right mind, right? Like who is, as they age
Wow.
and they're vulnerable. Um,
Yeah, who
if
also are
you're
we allowed
right,
to use violence against?
right, like
Mm-hmm.
if you think there's, I
What if a
can't get through to
country's
them,
doing
I
what I
can't
don't
get
want
through
them
to
to
them.
do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we bomb those children in the countries that we don't
Right.
like? Or if they're not
If
obeying?
yeah, if we pray first and are calm
Mm,
about it, maybe we can.
wow.
Yeah.
Right? You
That's
Yeah.
know?
overhead.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Wow.
I think this what we are hoping is that we can kind of start to break down the idea for evangelicals that this is a biblical mandate, because once that piece
Yeah.
falls out, then people have to grapple with that choice differently.
Mm-hmm.
They have to own that choice based on some other value, right? Based on some other belief, whether that's a adherence to being behaviorist, or some other belief that they have that's kind of more leaning toward an authoritarian
Mm.
view of the relationship
Mm-hmm.
between parent and child. But once you knock that biblical mandate piece out, then you can have a conversation that doesn't have this like thought terminating cliche there that's like, well, the Bible says so, you know, like that
Mm-hmm.
just ends up terminating the whole conversation. Um, and I'm hoping this can kind of take that out.
Yeah.
I love the term behaviorist that you're using. I think that's a really helpful way to frame it because while in my case, it actually spanking was not effective in really achieving
Mm-hmm.
those behaviors. It exacerbated things. I know that in many cases you are able to achieve surface level compliance through punishment in that way. And for those who maybe watched season 1 of Shiny Happy People, like one of the themes there that the Duggars kids were all very well behaved, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and when you have that many, I can see how like you use whatever techniques are at your disposal, but they're like well behaved, like this little military troop or something. But I know, like when I was at Bob Jones University, for example, like well behaved just meant that I was good at sneaking, that I was good at hiding, that if I wasn't getting demerits, it just was because I was figuring out how to. You just go in turn. No, that doesn't have anything to do with heart change. That has nothing to do with the relationship. That has nothing to do with your connection with your kids. That behavior might, if it's rooted in fear of threats and punishments, then is that really even what we want out of our kids?
Right.
So one thing though
Mm.
that is tricky when it came for me to change my parenting paradigm is it's not just about, oh, what does the rod mean in scripture and like what are these handful of Bible verses about spanking. There was a deeper theological foundation that fueled a lot of this, that I was told that fundamentally I was born wicked, and I needed my will to be broken essentially because
Yeah.
of my original sin, that there was a fundamental badness in me. And so there was an assumption even that yeah, that normal developmental things were often rooted in sin. I mean, I remember hearing sermons that, tantruming toddlers were having, were in rebellion essentially. And then look, there's their sin
Yeah.
nature coming out early, those kinds of things, that our humanness, when we believe that humans are born wicked and deserving of punishment, then spanking is a very natural theological conclusion to come to. So how do you help people who are like, well, this feels like a betrayal of my entire theological paradigm?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. A lot of this is tied into, I'm sure you talk about, I'm eager to read your book. You talk about it a lot, into inaccurate or at least incomplete view of atonement as primarily being about penal substitutionary atonement, right? And punishment. That God is primarily interested in our good behavior. And if someone behaves badly, he's primarily interested in punishing that. Kind of doesn't
He's
matter who gets
required
punished.
to punish them.
Yeah,
He's
required.
bound by it.
Punish that. Yeah.
And it kind of doesn't matter who gets punished as long as somebody gets
It's
punished,
actually
right?
that's actually such a good point because I actually, as a parent, felt guilty when I didn't spank my kids
Mm-hmm.
because God. Sin must be punished.
Yeah.
If you let it get away, then that's the bad thing. Spanking isn't the bad thing. The bad thing that I felt guilty about was letting them get away with it. I still, to
Yeah.
Giving
this
it a
day, when I
pass.
don't punish my kids, I still
Yeah.
have this sense of, ooh, did I do a bad thing? Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
It's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
Kelsey, did you want to say
No, I
something?
just that
Yeah.
whole like don't give sin a pass thing
Yeah.
plays in the
Right.
back of my brain. I like
Yeah.
I still have to like nope. You know what?
Yep.
But yeah, it occurs to me all the time.
And I mean, there's so many things we could talk about there, but what I find fascinating is always when this paradigm is presented to parents, they are positioned in the role of God as an agent of God in godlike authority, dealing out the punishment for sin, diagnosing sin and punishing
Mhm.
it. They are not included in the gathered people of God, where their children are their brothers and sisters in Christ, that they together are part of the gathered of people of God. So it in some ways is idolatrous in that parents are put in this godlike role and doing this theological role play that really reveals the stowaway doctrines at play, that genuinely reveals the view of God as punitive, distant, angry, upset, needing, required to punish. I
Yeah.
stitched today, just Mark Driscoll, it won't surprise anyone, was talking about this stuff. You know, he has a whole clip talking about how parents need to, it's not punishment, it's discipline to lick or spank your child. And it's fascinating to me
He
how
said licked.
he's like
Oh,
stitching
okay.
somebody who's
I got you.
using the term licking their kid
Lick them.
anyway.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
like whipping them. But I think it
Liquor
was
code.
so telling because it's Mark Driscoll that the people who are saying this are quick to deal that out to others, but incapable of being confronted on their own sin, however we want to categorize that, right? Like in the resources, sin becomes a catch-all. Any behavior a parent doesn't like is sin. So I don't want to give that too much credence, but it's interesting. It's the pastors, it's those in authority saying, oh, those who act as agents of God should be punishing sin through corporal punishment. Um, but there's no accountability for them, right? And that happens with parents as well. It's all happening behind closed doors. Like theoretically, yes, they are accountable to God. They'll be told that, but no, they are uncontestable authorities in the home where they demand first time obedience, standards of perfection of their children that they don't hold themselves to. All the while they are singing about grace and mercy, and it really is the parable of the unforgiving servant writ large. They are eager to receive that for themselves, but man, you cannot give sin a pass in your child. You need to act out this role play and spank them, and it's such a betrayal. It's horrible parenting advice, and then it's just such a betrayal, as far as what theological and spiritual catechesis is happening as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Uh, a helpful paradigm shift for me, this is a small one that could be helpful to a parent that might be struggling with this sense of like justice has to be served or the punishment
Mm-hmm.
must be paid, is that, in Jesus in the Lord's Prayer, he doesn't pray pay our debts. He prays forgive us our debts as we forgive our
Mm.
debtors. And in some ways, we've really changed the gospel from debt forgiveness to debt payment. And those are
Whew.
two very
Yep.
different things. And now we kind of have a world where even Christians are against debt forgiveness. Even the idea of like student loan cancellation, it's like, no, somebody's got to pay it. Somebody has to pay the debt, as if every debt must be paid. When actually debt forgiveness is canceling debts, not and forgiving them. They go away. They don't need to be paid.
Yeah.
And so
Oh,
it's
that's
kind of
good.
odd that we like think that everything needs a payment, which is in that sense, God is not really God. It's like the punishment is a God that's higher than God. Like
Mm-hmm.
God is subservient to this justice that's like God is accountable to in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about God is God can just be God and be gracious and forgive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a helpful paradigm shift. I don't know if that's helpful for anybody else, but
Yeah, it's
um,
good.
I, in a lot of these books, you're able to look to secular experts and draw from data, mental health data, what leads to better outcomes for depression, anxiety, all these things. And Christians tend to be skeptical of those kinds of things because, like you said, it's like, well, that's coming from the world. Do you have any yeah, what would you say, I guess, to people who are like, well, that might be what the scientists say, but this is what the Bible says? Because, and how do you think we can think about those things better, working together better?
Yeah.
Mm, yeah. You know, this was not this was not always a contentious relationship between kind of
Mm.
mainstream psychology and kind of the Christian biblical counseling movement. That kind of enmity between those groups was very manufactured in the 60s and 70s and 80s. So it has not always been that way, I would say. So, there is precedent for, I think, pre James Dobson. You had figures like Clyde Naramore and even someone like Paul Tournier, who is like a Swedish psychotherapist and a Christian. There are voices in Protestant Christianity who were very, highly credentialed psychologists and Christians, and had kind of a synthesis of these two things. It kind of did away with any tension between them. So this skepticism of anything that the mainstream psychology world has to offer is relatively new, partly because psychology is also a relatively new field. But anyway, now
Mm.
I'm way far afield here. But, you know, I think there has been so much fear mongering that the world is out to break down the nuclear family. One reason why this was so effective in the 70s was that James Dobson was really able to convince evangelical parents that, like, the mainstream world is attacking the nuclear family, wants to break it down, wants to pull it apart. That's why we have no fault divorce all of a sudden. That's why these kids are being allowed to run the roost in their homes. Actually, the state, the world, would like nothing more than for the nuclear family to break apart. And the advice that's coming from the mainstream is to that end. Like,
Mm.
all of it is kind of feeding the breakdown of the nuclear family. And that was really effective messaging. That's still really effective messaging. It's a big part of what undergirds the parental rights movement on the evangelical right. And so I think I would always encourage Christians to just say, like, look at the people who are alarmed by mainstream psychology. What is it that they think is the end game of mainstream psychology? Um, do you think that they are looking to break down the nuclear family? If so, why? Who told you that? Like, that was a
Mm.
big part of James Dobson's message, but he had a very politically motivated message,
Mm.
very particular reasons for telling people that. And it's so much more tied up in politics and reactionary conservatism than in, like, I would say a Christian worldview. Um,
Mm.
so I don't know, Marissa, what would you add to that? So that was a
Yeah.
very answer, by the
No,
way.
that's all great. I mean, I agree. And I think one thing we would love for readers of our book to see is how much of this was invented, and it's relatively myopic. Like, it has been presented as like timeless biblical truths, but a lot of
Mm,
these right way to parent are just cultural Christian things, really like engineered originally by Dobson, and a lot of people recycled and built on that. And if we could just deflate it all down to, like, this is just somebody's opinion, like
Yeah.
another parent's opinion, that would maybe help free some Christians up to say, look, there is tremendous freedom for the Christian parent. There, you have a number of things you can look to for advice. You don't need to look to someone who is self-platformed, self-credentialed, and just claiming that things are biblical. Like, you can be empowered to think critically, pull from a lot of different resources. All truth is God's truth. Like, we can be free to
yeah.
explore and get curious. And I would also, for people who still resonate with the idea of the Bible as a source of authority or wisdom, I would say, look, Jesus is our hermeneutic as Christians. So yes, source the Bible, but the starting place should be the life and teaching and ministry and example of Jesus. And that really can maybe free parents up to see their children as their smallest and newest neighbors, to read all the gorgeous one anothering verses we get in the New Testament and say, look, this applies to our family relationships. How do we be forbearing with one another, to be gentle, to seek the good of another, to inconvenience ourselves for our children? And some of these verses that are just suspiciously skipped over in all the resources. Like there's a lot of proof texting that happens in these books, but it's almost constantly verses about the rod, or Hebrews 12, or Genesis, I think 17, about promises to Abraham. Very rarely are they looking at the life and teaching of Jesus or the direct instructions given to Christian parents. There's only two repeated twice, and there's one repeated twice in the New Testament, and it's fathers, do not embitter or provoke your children to anger. Like, if someone wants a biblical principle, like, hold that in mind, and you got a lot of leeway under that if you've got in mind, do not embitter or provoke my children to anger. So I just think there's so much freedom, and so many people who were formed by this, whether as children or adults, were on these treadmills, were in this pressure cooker. And I think it's understandable to be looking for someone else to tell you a different way, to be like, okay, if I can't follow this Christian parenting expert, who's the psychologist I can follow, or who's the child development person I can follow? And I think it's great to drink deeply from all of that, like pull from a number of resources, but to also restore agency back to parents, to say you've got some parental intuition as well. Like, your children well, you can be freed up to like study the child in front of you, learn your own temperament, and really, it can look different. There's not one size fits all parenting. That's another myth. There's so many myths, but that's a big one.
Man, that's really helpful. It's true that we were conditioned to only listen to certain voices and to be very mistrustful of other voices. I say in my book at the time when I'm talking about the way that I was parented, I go out of my way to say that my parents were not negligent and they cared deeply about being good parents. They read a lot of parenting books because they cared about being good parents. Unfortunately, a lot of these parenting books gave them, really bad information. And I think that's the case for a lot of Christian parents who, like, they're trying to be good parents, but they're told that there are certain sources they're not supposed to trust. And I wonder if part of it too, it's like, they need it to come from Christian sources, because otherwise I think sometimes it's like, oh, I can actually become a good parent from actually just reading some of this secular psychology. And they're like, well, then what's the point of Christianity? Like, what is Christian? Doesn't it have to be coming from us? What do we have to offer? So I guess, what would you say to someone who's like, well, then, yeah, well, how does Christianity, what does it have to say to parents? If not all this punitive authoritarian stuff, like, and if we're going to throw away so much of the advice that's been given us, is there anything that we should be taking from from the life of Jesus? Like, what would be some nuggets that you're like, this is a good piece of Christian parenting advice that Christianity can offer parents?
That's such a good question. This was actually, I think they'd be okay with me saying this. This was one of the first questions my parents asked me when I told them I was writing this book.
Interesting.
They were sort of like, don't you think the Bible has anything to say? Don't you think Christianity has anything? Do you just not think it has anything to say about parenting? And I was sort of taken aback by that question. I think I one of my pet peeves has become one of my pet peeves is the self-helpification, kind of the Christian self-help, trying to figure out how to use the Bible as like a self-optimization something to spin off into, you name it, whatever the self-help book, dating, marriage, parenting, whatever. And I just think in general that's a really bad use of the Bible. And I'm saying this as not a theologian, cultural historian here. But I think if I am following Jesus, I'm a better parent. Like, I mean, I think that's kind of as simply as I can say it. If I am following the example of Christ, I'm a better parent. I do not control my children. Jesus did not control his followers. And we see again and again, he resists the temptation to control the people around him all the time. And that is a model that I want to follow. And it's a model that makes me a better parent on the rare occasion that I can do it well, you know?
Mm,
And I think that's what I would say right now is I'd say resist the impulse to do the self-optimization, self-helpy stuff, and just look look to Christ and follow that example. You, the parent, um, accepting that you don't control your children, that they also will hopefully want to look to Christ too, but I also can't force them to do
Yeah.
that, you know?
mm-hmm.
Rather than, in
Yeah.
other words, looking at the Bible as like a tips and tricks manual for every facet of life that's supposed to give us like the, practical solutions for all these problems, instead, like a way of love to follow that impacts all of our
Yeah.
relationships.
It
Well, I love how
impacts,
you said
yeah.
it a second ago, Marissa, too, just
Mm,
remembering that children are people to be loved, just like other people and any relationship in some ways, all of that we learn. And especially the way, when Jesus meets with children, he almost meets with them in the same way that in his ministry he was always siding with the poor and different
mm, mm.
marginalized groups. In some ways, children were also a marginalized group that Jesus focused on. And you
Yeah.
actually go into like a liberation theology for children just a
Mm-hmm.
little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to say anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would add to that. I'm a Christian. I think how we approach the Christian story does shape our parenting. And it's worth noting that the Bible mostly comes to us in narrative form. It is telling us a story. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity there if we could give that some space to breathe, because it's good news for everybody if it's really not about our performance and about getting it all right and even being the best parent we can be and being an excellent Christian. As understandable as it is to want that, of course we want that, um, because it invites us to reconsider the whole framework, right? I often think of it as like this house of cards, and you start wiggling around one or another of those cards, and the whole thing's gonna topple. And I think that happens here because it's a it's a different way of thinking about of being in the world and of being in relationship with God, because I think a lot of times we think of it like this quest. To borrow like video game rhetoric, I use this example a lot. Like this quest, like we are on the journey. We're in a quest video game. We are trying to find the right path to succeed at this quest, and that's a little bit different than like a sandbox model that says we're here in this world and
Mm,
we have the gift of life and we're exploring. And if we expand that out to think of God as well, in God incarnate. I mean, the incarnation's so gorgeous here. With us in this, that invites us to a paradigm of connection over behavior that says the quest isn't maybe the point, it's the connectedness. And that, man, that is a message of grace for all of us, that maybe God wants to be with us. Maybe he likes us a little bit, like maybe so. Maybe he's not bound by like has to be distant and wounded by our sin. Like maybe he draws near even in the middle of our sin and death and mess. And I think, man, that'll preach a word of grace to parents and children alike if we would allow it. And that's good news. I
it's
do
really good
think
news.
Christianity, the gospel has good news for people. What's presented as it is often not good news, but I think it does have good news.
I think you're gonna like my book based on what you just said.
I'm so excited to read it.
I was really vibing with everything you just said there.
Yeah, it's
um,
on. You know how book launch is. It's like at the end of this, I have all these books I want to read, but yours is one of them. I'm very
can
curious
I
to
show you
read.
something?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I feel that.
That's just one stack.
Yep.
That's
I
just
feel
the
it.
right here stack. There's another one right here. There's some more. It's getting gnarly over here. Oh man, what else did I want to ask you guys? This has been we've already been actually, wow, if we've been going 45 minutes already.
Yeah.
Okay, I meant to even be faster than that. I could talk about this for a long time. I care about this deeply.
Good
In
too.
fact, I
Yeah.
will say that my journey as a parent helped my
Mm,
theology shift in many ways, because I believed things about God, myself, and my kids, myself and other people, to include my kids, that that didn't work in the real
yeah.
world. It didn't lead to connection in my relationships. My theology was making my relationships worse. It was making it
Mm,
impossible to love like Jesus did,
mm,
because it was sowing disconnection to those. Punitiveness does that. I don't think that
mm-hmm.
God. One of the reasons I don't believe God is a punisher is because punishment doesn't lead to greater love. Like if God was a
Mm,
punisher, he couldn't be a reconciler. And so
mm,
the punishment causes you to freeze and draw away. It doesn't draw you in. Love is what
yeah.
draws us in. And so I have, in some ways, my parenting and my theology deconstruction kind of happening very much in tandem and reinforcing one another. And I guess maybe the question there, so like for those of us who, for example, Good Inside is a classic example in many ways because the very title of the book itself, I think some Christians would be like, well, I can't buy that because that's just a lie right off the bat, right? Like,
Right.
yeah, oh, you already lost me, like 2 words
Yeah.
in, because I'm pretty sure Bad Inside is our starting point.
Mm.
And so when it seems like, you know, child development experts, people who are saying, hey, this is messaging that harms kids and parents and their relationships, and this is messaging that's good for kids. But when that feels unbiblical, feels counter to certain theologies, any last advice for parents in like, yeah, and how to move forward with that?
Mm.
Yeah, gosh. I think right now the weird backlash to the idea of empathy, I think,
Mm.
is a symptom of a system of Christian parenting that has always told parents, don't be too compassionate. Your impulse is going to be too compassionate with your children. Like, be careful, moms especially. Your impulse is going to be to show too much mercy. Don't do that. You're going to mess up your kids. They're going to become delinquents.
Wow.
And I'm not exaggerating. That is truly explicitly laid out in many of these books.
Yeah.
And
There's
that's the opposite of the gospel. Like, and
mm.
when you're reading these books, you just wonder, do these people believe that Jesus' work that he did for us here, do they believe it covered all sin or not? Like, do they believe that that is done or not? Do they believe that now we are free to love as God loves us? Are we free to love God and love our neighbor, and our kids
Mm-hmm.
are our neighbors? Are we actually
Mm-hmm.
free to do that? So don't trust anyone who's telling you your impulse is going to be too compassionate, too empathetic, to love too much. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a lie.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
And the fruit of it, like how many people do you know who are estranged from their parents?
Yeah.
Because it's that impulse didn't stop people from being delinquents. It created rifts in child parent relationships.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Many of these resources are like recipes for estrangement and inauthentic connection. I mean, we heard from so many people that they're navigating this, older parents with deep regrets, confusion, they feel betrayed because like you said, they were trying. They wanted to do it the right way and they had misplaced trust in these ideas that betrayed them. Adults saying, I would love to have authentic connection with my parents, but I can't because the expectation is still compliance. There's no capacity to disagree. There's no capacity to be a full person, an authentic person. There's a lot of very destructive fruit that's on display. None of it's theoretical anymore. So I would encourage people to look at the fruit. Like there are generations of adults saying this was harmful. We especially listen to older parents who say, "Gosh, I would give anything to go back
Wow.
and not do that if I could." I hear from broken-hearted older parents saying that. There are others who double down and defend themselves, certainly, and that also is heartbreaking in other ways. And people who are kind of stuck, as you asked, on this idea of total depravity or original sin, I would say, there's a heavy emphasis on Genesis 2 and 3 that skips right over Genesis 1, where God is saying this is good and people are good. And sometimes people will message me and say they have never heard before that there are multiple theories of atonement, or they have never heard before these other ideas. And so I will kind of always take an opportunity to encourage people to say, like, the breadth of the Christian tradition is there's a lot of breadth there. There's a lot of diversity there. And if you've been formed by evangelical Christian parenting, you've probably heard only a very small sliver of Christian teaching and probably a rudimentary presentation of these theories at that. So to kind of free some people up to maybe get curious, to explore what other corners of the church have said and taught about these things too.
I love
Mhm.
that. Final question that I'm curious of, especially because Kelsey, you have like a connection to Christianity Today, kind of a mainstream Christian publication. What do you think the chances are of people listening to you guys? What do you think the chances are of Christians in America listening to the data, shifting their mindset, saying, hey guys, we got from the leadership, from the top down, saying we got to stop spanking our kids. We've got to do better. We are hurting a generation. We should start, what do you think the chances are of that happening? Are you noticing any shifts? Are you feeling like people with cultural power are listening to, by the way, we're talking about the myth of good Christian parenting for those of you just joining us. It's a wonderful new book. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Any hope? Give us some.
I mean, I think it's a real mixed bag. There are things that make me very hopeful. Like we were on Preston Sprinkle's podcast. He's like very mainstream, normie evangelical guy. And, to hear him say, okay, you convinced me. Yeah, this is like spanking is like a practice that we should leave behind. I'm like, great. Can you just turn around and tell all of your followers
Wait a second.
that
You
now?
only just now convinced them?
I mean, he said, what did he say? He said he was like 99% there, but he hadn't really
He said he was
it.
kind of there, but that tipped him over. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe he's being nice.
I guess I should be encouraged, but actually, like, that's like a scholar, like he's like a doctor. This is one of the like intelligentsia of evangelicalism. That's actually really surprising to me that he only is just now getting there. So I guess that you were trying to give me hope, and I feel like now.
Sorry, that was
okay.
I meant that as a hopeful thing. But
yeah, no, it's good. It's a good thing.
But I really do like. I think I'm hopeful about that because I am pretty aware that like a book like Shepherding a Child's Heart that really is in part a spanking manual is still like the gold standard in like many SBC churches, especially, which is the largest evangelical denomination in the U.S. These teachings run very deep. There's been a weird narrative that, people don't spank their kids anymore, that's why they're misbehaved. That is not true. The data that we have is that at least half of American parents still spank their children, and that's just the people who will admit it on a survey. And and
that's not Christian parents. That's all
Christian,
parents.
that's everybody.
So much higher in Christian communities.
This is a common practice. In the U.S., there has been no like mass rejection of this. So I do sense that there are some people who are willing to re-examine that and maybe like, let's not do Shepherding a Child's Heart anymore. That would be fabulous. But then the thing that makes me really not optimistic is that the influencer sphere has no guardrails, and people are finding their little fragmented world, and it's allowing these teachings to kind of morph and re-emerge for younger generations in a new way. There's so much discussion right now at places like Christianity Today about what the landscape of spirituality is for young people. We're looking at it in real time. We don't actually know what's happening. Is there a spiritual awakening? Is it spiritual curiosity? We don't know. We won't know for a while. But among the spiritually curious who are in evangelical circles, they are rediscovering fundamentalism. Like we're seeing that happen with Forrest Frank right now, right? Like the weird rapture panic, the Taylor Swift panic, the Halloween panic, right? Like fundamentalism is not gone, and it still is a very appealing for young people who are drawn to faith, who want that fervor that they only feel like they find in fundamentalist evangelicalism. And those are the ones who are going to be drawn to like a Maddie Pruitt when she says we're going to spank our children. So there are multiple things happening at once. I don't know if I am more optimistic or more pessimistic, but I do see things that make me optimistic.
That's really well explained. And it reminds me, sometimes I like to say that I do think we need to bring fire and brimstone preaching back, but like for the right things. Like I think that we should preach with urgency about the harm of punitive theology. I think that we should preach with urgency about not hitting kids, not hurting kids, not bombing kids. Preach with guts and fervor, with the same fervor as the fundamentalists, that they preach a fear-based message of, you need to be afraid of your neighbors, be afraid of Halloween, be afraid of Taylor Swift. I want us to be afraid of genocide and afraid of a world that, won't honor the least of these. And I think that we should have, so in some ways I feel like maybe they're drawn to something that feels gutsy and like they're going to stand for something, because maybe there's like a squishy middle that's just being very soft about really big things. I think there are things that we should get like fired up about. I don't know if that's an answer. That's a side tangent, but
I love it too.
It does. I see what you're seeing, and I am like, why are people flocking to this? But it's easy for me to say because I was there 20 years ago, and so I've left it. And
but this is why I feel like we should be doing better, because it's not theoretical. Like something different now is we do have access. I know there's the algorithm, but we do have access to people saying, no, we did that. and it was horrible. Like, nobody should be listening to Mark Driscoll and Doug Wilson and Christian. You're like, we know
Literally
where that
Google
goes.
them.
Yeah, like
Literally
we
Google them.
know where this
Literally
goes.
Google them.
Google them, listen to the people who lived it. And so I'm hopeful because of that. I do think that there is a compelling message in survivors and those who've come out of these communities saying, here's the evidence. Like, okay, you don't want to listen to social scientists, listen to the people who lived it. Certainly people still stop up their ears to that and blame people, but I am hopeful with this next generation of parents that has access to that and can listen to that. There also are resources like The Flourishing Family is a book that came out by evangelical publishers. It's the first traditionally published Christian parenting book that presents the research against spanking that basically comes out and says that, and that's new, right? Like, there hasn't been a traditionally published resource.
While the bad ideas are still out there and prevalent, what didn't exist 20 years ago was a whole bunch of people already processing in real time. So as soon as those people are able to see the cracks, there's already resources available. Which is why this book matters. So, hey guys, if you missed it, we're talking about The Myth of Good Christian Parenting with Marissa, Franks, Burt, and Kelsey McGinnis. Just wanted to make sure I said your names right. I'm like,
you did great.
There's like 3 names each. I'm like, do I need to take some rules?
You did great.
This has been a delightful conversation. If you missed most of it, it's going to be posted to my feed, so you'll be able to grab it. And it's available now, right? Didn't it come out?
It is, yeah.
Okay, like
came out last week.
Congratulations, by the way. Should have started with that.
Thank you. Well, congratulations to you too. We're both like post-launch craziness.
Yeah, we're in the thick of it. I'm like, my head is like swimming, but it's fine. Yeah,
it's fine.
I'm
I hear
like
you.
so tired
That's what
of
it feels
talking
like.
about my book in some ways, but I'm sure you're gonna experience what I've experienced as well. That a lot of people are gonna be deeply helped by this book.
That's our hope.
Yeah, I think people are going to be triggered by it. They're going to be cracked open. They're going to probably mourn some things that happened to them in their childhood or things that they did as parents. But, grieving is a part of that healing process. And I think this book will ultimately be really healing for not only individuals, but hopefully also for us as a culture, as we sort through what does Christian parenting look like, because we've got to do better. Guys, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you so much.
So fun.
Have a good night, y'all.
Good night, everyone.
Grab this book. Bye.
Bye.